I'm Dara Mitchell. I'm 29. And tonight, I'm walking back into a room I spent years learning how to survive. After 5 long years, I'm about to face my arranged family again. They're gathering at Maison, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, to celebrate my sister Heather's engagement. They don't know what this place is to me. They don't know who I've become. They've always judged my choices, dismissed my culinary dreams, called them beneath our family name. They think I'm still the struggling one, the disappointment. But tonight, they're going to eat in a restaurant they think they chose, not knowing it's mine, not knowing I built it from nothing. My stomach knots as I straighten my simple black dress in the mirror. Nothing too flashy, understated, controlled. Sometimes the hardest reservations to make are with your own past. Before I continue, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. If you've ever had to prove your worth to the people who should have believed in you from the start, then I see you. Hit subscribe. This one's for us. Growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut meant something very specific. The Mitchells weren't just wealthy, we were legacy. My parents, Margaret and Richard, built their identities on the architecture of status. The right schools, the right professions, the right address. Our colonial home was a showpiece, fundraisers, garden parties. My mother paraded us like accessories, her pride measured by how well we fit into her curated vision of success. The Mitchell children are destined for greatness, she'd chirp to her friends. My father would nod, whiskey in hand, silent approval etched in stone. Heather's already set on Yale Law, she'd beam. And Ethan, such promise in mathematics. He'll make a brilliant investment banker. And then, the turn. When eyes shifted to me, Dara, the middle child, my mother's smile tightened. Dara has creative inclinations. She'll find her way. It meant I was the disappointment. While Heather crushed debate tournaments and Ethan aced math competitions, I hid in the kitchen. Elena, our housekeeper from Greece, was the only one who saw me. You have the hands for this work, she'd say, watching me dice vegetables with precision. You taste, you smell, you understand food in your soul. By 13, I was inventing my own recipes. By 16, I hosted underground dinner parties whenever my parents were away. The kitchen was mine. The only place I felt like I existed. But cooking, that was servants' work, my father declared the day I mentioned culinary school. Mitchells hire chefs. They don't become them. To pacify them, I applied to business schools. I got into Dartmouth, my father's alma mater. The plan was to follow the script, but even there, I cheated the system. I took food science electives, joined nutrition seminars. I ran a secret supper club from my apartment, charging students for 5-course meals that funded weekend workshops with local chefs. By grad school, the double life was burning me out. 6 months into my MBA, I was miserable. Then everything changed. Chef Laurent Bisset, French culinary legend, 3 Michelin stars, visited our campus. I helped cater a reception. He tasted my reduction, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Who taught you to make this?" I taught myself, I admitted. He handed me his card. You're wasting your talent here. Come to my kitchen in New York. I'll make you great. 2 weeks later, I stood in my parents' pristine living room and said I was dropping out of my MBA to attend culinary school. The silence was suffocating. This is absolutely unacceptable, my father said, his voice a quiet threat. We've invested everything in your education. Everything except respect for what I actually want, I replied. My mother's face turned to stone. If you pursue this hobby, she said, you'll do it without our support, financial or otherwise. Heather, home from her first year of Yale Law, let out a laugh. Cold, cutting, always the rebel. Let's see how long you last making minimum wage. Ethan, already at a top firm, just looked embarrassed. I left that night with one suitcase and my savings account. The next 5 years were harder than anything I'd known. 18-hour shifts, a tiny apartment shared with 3 roommates, burns on my arms, calluses on my hands, loans I didn't know how I'd repay. But under Chef Laurent's mentorship, I thrived. The kitchen demanded everything: discipline, precision, creativity. And I gave it more than I knew I had. Then came the opportunity. At one of Laurent's private events, an investor tasted my food, asked to meet the chef. We talked. He liked what he heard. 2 years ago, Maison opened its doors, with me as executive chef and partial owner. 6 months later, I bought out my partners. I became the sole proprietor. Yes, I used my business degree after all, just not in the way my family ever imagined. Maison quickly became the hardest reservation to get in the city. Last month, Food and Wine magazine featured us in their Future of American Cuisine issue. Through it all, I stayed distant from my family. Stilted holiday cards, a few clipped phone calls. They knew I was doing something with food, but nothing about how far I'd come. That was intentional. I wanted success to be mine, not a bargaining chip to earn their approval. So when the invitation came, elegant cardstock, gold-embossed script, inviting me to Heather's engagement dinner, I was stunned, even more stunned by the location. Maison. Of course, they didn't know it was mine. They probably picked it because it was exclusive, impressive, social capital wrapped in truffle oil. I debated for days. Then I said yes. Not to prove anything, but maybe to close the chapter. I was ready. I had nothing to hide, and nothing left to prove. But I hadn't anticipated how it would feel to watch them dine in my restaurant, critiquing the dishes I had poured my soul into. As I stood outside, staring through Maison's towering glass doors, I took one last deep breath. Time to play the struggling black sheep one last time. The scent hit me first. Maison's signature atmosphere, saffron, wine reduction, fresh, herbs, welcomed me like it always did. Usually, that scent grounded me. Tonight, it just tightened the knot in my stomach. I had dressed with care. A simple black Diane von Furstenberg dress. Pearls that once belonged to my grandmother. Understated, refined. Exactly the kind of look my status-conscious family would misread as trying too hard on a budget. My hair was pulled into a sleek chignon. I'd done it myself, of course. Another detail they'd likely interpret as a cost-saving compromise. Marcus, my senior server, spotted me at the entrance. His eyes widened just slightly. I rarely came in through the front, especially not as a guest. I gave him a subtle shake of my head. Not yet. He nodded discreetly and moved on. From the entryway, I could already see them. Center table, naturally. Heather in fresh season Gucci, perfectly postured beside a man I didn't recognize. Bradley, I assumed, with slicked back hair and a watch that screamed compensation. My mother in Chanel. My father engrossed in the wine list like it was a financial report. Ethan and his wife Allison in polished business attire. Picture perfect. Celeste, my hostess, approached with a warm smile. "Good evening, Ms." She caught herself just in time. "Your party is already seated. May I show you to their table?" "Thank you, Celeste," I said quietly. My mother noticed me first. She rose smoothly, air-kissing both cheeks. "Dara, you've finally arrived. We were beginning to wonder." "I'm exactly on time, Mother." I checked my watch. 7:30 on the dot. My father stood, offering a stiff hug, 2 quick pats on the back. "You look healthy," he said, which in Mitchell speak meant I wasn't thin enough. Heather barely stood. "This is Bradley," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Princeton undergrad, Wharton MBA, just made junior partner at Goldman. No, nice to meet you. No warmth, just a resume." The Mitchell family's love language. Ethan greeted me with more kindness. Allison's smile was tight. I'd later learn she had been the one tasked with booking this exclusive location. She had no idea she'd booked my restaurant. "We've already ordered champagne," my mother said as I took my seat. "I hope that's acceptable." They'd chosen the second most expensive bottle on the list. Showy, but not reckless. Very them. Around us, Maison buzzed softly. Precise lighting, carefully spaced tables, the hum of conversation. Every detail, from the chair design to the linen weight, had been chosen by me. And now I had to sit quietly as they moved through it like tourists. José, our sommelier, approached with the champagne. He glanced at me, one brow raised. Should I say anything? I shook my head ever so slightly. "Excellent choice," he said to my father, presenting the bottle with practiced grace. "We're celebrating an engagement," my father announced, loud enough for attention, subtle as a brass band. "Maison is honored to host," José replied smoothly. "I'm surprised you managed a reservation," I said, keeping my tone light. "I've heard it's quite difficult." Bradley smirked. "I know people." A wink. "Called in a favor with a client who's close to the management." I bit my tongue. The client was likely Craig Winters, one of our investors who sometimes requested reservations for associates. "I'll be speaking to him about Bradley." "Well, aren't you resourceful?" I murmured, raising my glass. "To Heather and Bradley." My father lifted his flute. "A perfect match, and a brilliant future." Glasses clinked. The champagne was chilled to the exact temperature I trained the team to maintain. No one noticed. "So, Dara," my mother said, setting her glass down, turning toward me with performative interest. "What have you been up to these past few years? You've been so mysterious." 5 sets of eyes landed on me, evaluating, waiting to judge. "I've been working in food," I said simply. "Learning, growing." "Still with that cooking phase?" Heather sighed. "I thought surely you'd have moved on to something more substantial by now." "Not everyone can handle the corporate path," Ethan added. An attempted defense that still landed like an insult. Bradley tilted his head, confused. "What exactly do you do? Line cook? Catering? Waitstaff?" "I've worn many hats," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Well, we're just glad you're managing to support yourself," my mother said, all faux graciousness. "Though of course our door is always open, if things get too challenging." Jessica, one of our best servers, approached with the amuse-bouche, a delicate sphere of compressed watermelon with fermented black garlic and a microgreen I personally sourced from an urban farm. "Compliments of the kitchen," she said, placing one before each guest. Her eyes met mine, just briefly. Loyalty in a glance. Then back to business. "This is it?" Heather asked, poking the amuse-bouche. "I'm famished." "It's a palate opener," I explained. "The meal hasn't, started yet." "I know what an amuse-bouche is, Dar," she snapped. "Just because I chose law over playing with food doesn't mean I'm culturally illiterate." They each tasted. My mother took the tiniest bite, calories always on her mind. My father popped it whole, barely tasting. Ethan and Allison seemed genuinely intrigued. Bradley, well, he pretended to be a sommelier again, throwing around flavor terms that made no sense. Heather didn't touch hers. "I don't do raw garlic," she said. "It's fermented. Aged for 60 days, I replied. "It's not raw." She rolled her eyes and pushed the plate away. Jessica's expression flickered with disappointment. Not at me, at how Heather dismissed what we'd created. Because this wasn't just food. Maison was more than a restaurant. It was my home, my sanctuary, my chosen family, and they were already tearing it apart with their old familiar arrogance. The first course arrived. Heirloom tomatoes, house-made, ricotta, basil oil, a dish I had refined over months. As they launched into talk of Heather's wedding, guest lists, seating charts, yacht feuds, I sat silent, half listening, barely tasting my own work. The judgment was already creeping back in. The old narrative. I was still the outsider, the misfit, the one whose choices had to be explained away. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know they were dining in a place I built from, the ground up, and soon, very soon, that secret would change everything. I let them talk. About florists and monogrammed napkins and a guest list bloated with people no one actually liked. It was all so familiar. The politics of appearances, the performance of importance. 400 guests seems excessive, I ventured, swirling. A sip of wine I had personally selected to pair with the tomato course. It's not just a celebration, Bradley said, leaning in as if offering wisdom. It's networking, relationship investments. Exactly, my father chimed in. Bradley understands. A wedding of this caliber opens doors. The food arrived. No one noticed the timing, the pacing, the service choreography I'd spent years refining. Heather turned to me suddenly, her voice sugar-coated but sharp underneath. And what about you, Dara? Any prospects on your horizon, or are you still too busy with your cooking? She pushed the heirloom tomatoes around her plate, barely touched. I'm focused on my career, I said calmly. Career, Ethan repeated with a faint laugh. Is that what we're calling it? My mother jumped in, her voice laced with polite judgment. Surely by 29 you're thinking of settling down. There's that lovely son of Margaret Whitley's. He's in hospital administration. Very stable. I'm not looking to be set up, Mother. Well, your options do narrow with each passing year, she continued undeterred. Especially in your situation. Before I could respond, Jessica returned to clear the first course. Is there a problem with the dish? She asked Heather, noting the untouched plate. Too acidic, Heather replied, not meeting her eyes. The tomatoes could have been riper. I bit the inside of my cheek. Those tomatoes had been hand-selected that morning. Peak ripeness, sourced from a farm that grew exclusively for us. Jessica nodded. I'll be sure to inform the kitchen. The second course arrived. Seared scallops, brown butter emulsion, pickled ramps, one of my proudest creations. My father cut into his scallop. Now, this looks promising. Bradley swirled his wine. Decent list here. Not exceptional, but passable. Jose, passing by, caught my eye. I gave him a subtle smile. He had once been a sommelier in Paris, at a Michelin-starred restaurant. He had turned down offers from Dubai, London, and Tokyo to work with me. But sure, passable. So, Dara, Allison said gently, trying to redirect. What exactly do you do? Before I could speak, Heather answered for me. She's probably hostessing somewhere, right, Dar? Using that business degree to hand out menus. I started, no shame in that, my father interrupted. Everyone has to start somewhere, though after 5 years I would have expected advancement. I've advanced, I said quietly. Into what? Heather asked with a smirk. Assistant manager at Applebee's? Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Heather, I'm just being realistic, she said, shrugging. She abandoned her education for a passion project. Actions have consequences. I took another sip of wine. How's law treating you, Heather? I asked, smiling. Her expression tightened. I'm between positions at the moment. She was working too many hours, Bradley said quickly. I told her, my wife doesn't need to kill herself at some firm. Once we're married, she can focus on charity work, like my mother. A flicker passed through Heather's eyes. Something almost like resentment. Then it vanished behind a practiced smile. The third course arrived. Hand-rolled tagliatelle, with spring peas, pancetta, and mint. One of our signature dishes. My mother raised an eyebrow. 3 bites? All this expense for a few noodles? It's about quality over quantity, I replied. The tasting menu is designed to showcase a range of flavors and textures. In my day, my father grumbled, restaurants gave you a proper meal. This new cuisine nonsense is just a way to charge more for less. Bradley stabbed his pasta, cutting it like a steak. The strands unraveled, the delicate texture destroyed. Then Heather asked the question I knew was coming. So, how exactly are you affording a place like this? On a food service salary? The room quieted, all eyes on me. I manage my finances carefully, I said. Oh, please, she scoffed. A dinner here costs more than you probably make in a day. Who are you dating? Is he paying for this? I'm not dating anyone. Then how are you affording this place? Heather, Ethan warned. That's enough. No, I want to know, she said, folding her arms. We all rearranged our schedules for this dinner, she suggested. Either she's in debt or she's lying. The fourth course arrived. Duck breast, cherry gastrique, farro. Bradley took one bite, then grimaced. This is undercooked. It's medium rare, I explained. That's how duck should be served. I prefer well done, he snapped, signaling Jessica. Take it back. Cook it properly. Jessica met my eyes. I gave her the smallest nod. She would start over. I wouldn't let her ruin a perfectly cooked dish by over-searing it. Really, Dara? My mother said after Jessica walked away. You still haven't answered Heather's question. How are you affording this? The old tightness returned to my chest, the one I'd felt at every family dinner growing up. The sensation of being outnumbered, outranked, unheard. I could have told them then, dropped the facade, watched their smug certainty dissolve into shock. But before I could speak, Jessica returned with Bradley's duck. Overcooked, dry, flavorless. Much better, he said, chewing proudly. My father motioned for the wine list. Let's order something more impressive. Jose approached, with the list. My father pointed to a Bordeaux, over $800. This should be adequate. I'd suggest something that pairs better with the remaining courses, I said gently. He waved me off. I think I know my wines, Dara. Jose looked to me for guidance. I gave him a small nod. Let it go. This wasn't the hill to die on. Dessert came. A deconstructed lemon tart. Crisp, airy, layered. More commentary. More jabs. By the time coffee was served, I was exhausted. Not just from the performance, but from the weight of everything unspoken. Then Marcus approached. The check, discreetly placed in a black folder, arrived at the table. My father reached for it, as expected. But Bradley intercepted. Please, Richard, allow me, he said with that same performative generosity. My treat. My father gave the obligatory protest, then nodded. Bradley opened the folder and froze. Just for a second, a flicker of confusion. No problem? My father asked. No, Bradley said. Just confirming the calculation. Of course he was. Surprised. A dinner for 7, with premium wine, substitutions, and that Bordeaux, easily over $3,000. Not outrageous for Maison, but clearly more than he'd expected. Heather, sensing a crack in his composure, turned back to me. So, Dara, she said sweetly, you never did explain how you're managing to contribute to this extravagant dinner. Again, all eyes turned to me, still expecting a struggling waitress, still convinced I was pretending at success. I can cover my portion, I said. Can you? She pressed. A meal here costs more than you probably make in a week. Then Bradley frowned. Wait, he said. There's a mistake. They've only charged us for the wine, not the food. He waved Marcus over. There's an error. Marcus approached, perfectly calm. Is there a problem, sir? You forgot the food, We've only been charged for beverages. Marcus glanced at me, waited. I gave a small nod. He turned back to the table. No error, sir, he said smoothly. The dinner portion has been taken care of. By whom? My father asked. Marcus turned to me and smiled. Welcome back, Miss Dara. Your usual table is ready for your investor meeting. Would you like me to handle this situation first? Silence. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me, stunned. I looked up. Thank you, Marcus. Yes, please close out Mr. Harrington's beverage tab. The rest is on the house, as usual. Marcus took the check from Bradley's slack grip and walked, away without a ripple. The entire table was frozen. Chef Miranda also mentioned she'd like your opinion on the new spring menu, Marcus added over his shoulder, like it was any other night. I turned toward my family, slowly. Every face held a different kind of shock. Bradley looked like someone had unplugged him. Ethan's mouth was slightly open. Allison was blinking fast, calculating. My mother's hand had risen to her pearls, her tell when socially destabilized. My father's expression was stone. Heather was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. What is happening? My mother finally asked, her voice thinner than usual. I looked at her, at all of them. Then I said it, simply. Welcome to Maison, my restaurant. Silence. My restaurant, I repeated. I'm the executive chef and the sole proprietor. My father found his voice first. You own this place? Yes, I said calmly. Heather shook her head. No, that's not. This is one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. It's been in magazines. Yes, I said again. Food and Wine last month. Bon Appetit the month before. The New York Times gave us 4 stars last year. Bradley just blinked. But you said you worked in food. You were vague about everything. Because I wanted to see how you'd treat me if you thought I was still struggling, I said, my voice even. And now I know. My mother's lips parted. Darling, why wouldn't you tell us? Her tone changed instantly. Emphasis on achievement. Success had sanitized my disobedience. Would you like the full story? I asked, already knowing the answer didn't matter. I left 5 years ago with $2,000 in a suitcase. I rented a room with 3 roommates. In Queens, I worked 18-hour days at 3 different jobs: prep cook, line cook, bakery assistant. I had burns, scars. I studied until I passed out on the floor. Chef Laurent mentored me. I became his sous chef within 18 months. I took a sip of water. No one interrupted. 2.5 years ago, I cooked at a private event for his restaurant. A guest tried my dish, James Warren of Warren Capital. He asked to meet the chef. He offered to invest in my vision. I developed the concept, found this space. A failed nightclub. I designed the menu, the interiors, hired the staff, ran the financials. I gestured around us. I built this, every inch. My father frowned. But the cost? $3.4 million to start. James brought in 2 others. We opened with full reservations and immediate press. And now? Heather asked, voice low. I bought out my investors last year, I said. Maison is mine. The realization landed. In waves. All the jabs, the assumptions, the dismissiveness. And now, the recalculating had begun. Heather's voice was small. So, this is why you suggested dinner here? No, I said. Allison picked it. Isn't that right? All eyes turned to her. She turned crimson. I didn't know, she said quickly. I swear. The concierge at Ethan's firm just said it was the most impressive restaurant in the city. I believe you, I said gently. No one in? The family knew. That was deliberate. But why? My mother asked. I laughed, softly, without humor. Because when I told you about culinary school, you cut me off. Because you laughed when I said I loved something you didn't understand. Because your approval was conditional, and I didn't want it that way. We were just trying to protect you, my father said stiffly. No, I said. You were trying to protect the image of who you wanted me to be. Chef Miranda appeared at that moment, saving me. Sorry to interrupt, Dara, she said, professional as always. The Matsuhisa party is ready for their tasting, and SA wants to confirm your interview for next week's Spotlight series. Also, your publisher called about the cookbook cover. Thank you, I said. Let them know I'll be there shortly. As she walked away, Heather echoed, Cookbook? Yes, I replied. Coming out this fall. 120 recipes, personal stories. It's already being translated into French and Japanese. My mother tried to recover. This is all so impressive. Why didn't you tell us? Because I needed to succeed for myself, not to make you proud. I turned to go. But before I could take a step, my father spoke. We're proud of you now. I paused, not because I believed it, but because I heard the weight in it. For Richard Mitchell, admitting pride without control, that was his version of a confession. And then, Bradley spoke. This restaurant must be doing very well, he said, tone suddenly interested again. Have you considered expansion? A hospitality group? I know investors. I laughed outright. I'm doing just fine with my current team. Heather frowned. So all this time, you let us criticize your food, your wine list, all while knowing it was yours? I wanted to see how you'd treat me when you thought I was nobody, I said, and you showed me. That was manipulative, she snapped, but her voice faltered. Not as manipulative as assuming I couldn't afford dinner without a wealthy boyfriend, I replied, or suggesting I was maxing out credit cards to sit at this table. The restaurant had begun to empty. Jose approached with a bottle. Your reserve cognac, Miss Dara, for your investors. Thank you, I said. Tell Chef Miranda I'll be there in 10. I turned back to the table. I have a business to run. Dara, wait! My mother called after me. Don't leave like this. I stopped, looked back. Why not? I asked. Let us celebrate this. We're your family. You weren't my family when I needed you. We thought it was a phase. You thought it was beneath you. You have your father's business sense, she offered, trying to spin it now. I built this without your money, your help, or your approval. Bradley leaned forward. If you ever do want to expand, I shook my head. Don't network through me, Bradley. Tonight wasn't a pitch meeting. Heather looked like she'd bitten into something bitter. You used tonight to test us, she said. That's cruel. You tested yourselves, I replied. I just watched. Chef Miranda reappeared. They're ready. Coming, I said. I looked back at the table one last time, at the faces of the people who had once made me feel small. I don't need your approval, I said. I never did. And with that, I turned and walked toward the kitchen, the one place that had always known my worth. I walked into the kitchen like I always did, confident, focused, grounded. Miranda looked up from the expo station. You okay? She asked, not like a boss checking in on an employee, but like someone who knew exactly what kind of battlefield I'd just walked off of. Getting there, I replied. She nodded once. No need to ask more. In the private dining room, my investors were waiting. The H. Ayford Group, 3 sharp, seasoned professionals who had already begun discussing expansion concepts over reserve cognac and foie gras. I joined them. I talked projections, locations, licensing potential, but part of me was still back in the dining room, watching that stunned silence stretch across my family's faces. The next few days moved like clockwork. Spring menu planning, cookbook edits, a design meeting for the packaging of our house-made sauces. My life, exactly as I had built it. But late at night, sitting in my office, I found myself rewatching the evening in my head, not the applause-worthy finale, but the quiet moments in between. The ones where I still felt like that girl at the kitchen table being asked to justify her dreams. Then came Sunday, brunch with the family. I had suggested Alma's, a tiny place in the East Village run by an old friend from my line cook, Days. It was the opposite of maison, graffiti on the walls, mismatched chairs, vinyl menus. My parents arrived first, visibly uncomfortable in the cramped space. "It's eclectic," my mother said diplomatically, lowering herself into a plastic chair like it might bite her. My father scanned the chalkboard specials. "Is there decaf?" Heather and Bradley arrived next. Her outfit screamed casual on purpose. His expression read still recovering from being outmaneuvered. Ethan and Allison brought their kids, two bright-eyed boys who immediately started playing with the sugar packets. Then the food came. Thick slabs of sourdough, eggs poached to perfection. Shakshuka so rich and layered, my father actually groaned. "I didn't know eggs could taste like this," he admitted, mopping the sauce with his bread. "Now imagine what that same flavor does with duck confit," I said with a small smile. Heather looked like she was trying not to enjoy herself. Bradley asked if Alma catered weddings. I ignored him. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something. Later that week, I found myself alone at Maison after closing. Jessica was counting the till. Marcus and Jose debated next week's wine pairings. Miranda had already left, but not before reminding me about the spring menu launch event. My phone buzzed. A text from Heather. "Florist just doubled the quote. Need coffee and blunt advice. You free tomorrow?" I stared at the message, surprised. She wanted my opinion. She needed me. I texted back. "Sure. Noon at Blue Hour. I'll bring spreadsheets." The relationship with my family wasn't magically fixed, but it was shifting. No longer a performance of perfection, but a slow dance toward mutual respect. My mother had called 3 times in the past 2 weeks. She still couched, her praise in caveats, but her tone had softened. My father sent me an article titled "Women Reshaping Fine Dining," a silent olive branch. Ethan texted to ask if he could bring his kids by the kitchen one day. "I want them to know," he wrote, "that success doesn't always wear a tie." Even Bradley, for all his bluster, had apologized, awkwardly, but genuinely. None of it erased the past, but it didn't need to. Healing wasn't about pretending it never hurt. It was about refusing to let the pain define what came next. I had always thought I wanted dramatic closure, a climactic moment where they apologized, cried, begged me to forgive them. Instead, what I got was quieter, more human, real. That mattered more. Especially because the most significant change wasn't theirs, it was mine. For years, I had been trying to prove something to people who had already decided I wasn't enough. Now, I didn't need to. Because I knew I was. Not because of magazine features or 7-figure valuations, but because I had built a life I loved, on my own terms. Every Saturday morning, Maison's kitchen turned into something else. A classroom, a sanctuary, a place where 8 young chefs, many from underserved communities, came to learn. Knife skills, sauce technique, palate development, but also belief. Zoe, one of my mentees, had just completed her first plated dinner service. She shook, the entire time, burned her first sauce. But by the end of the night, she was glowing. "You see me?" she whispered. No one ever really saw me before. I knew exactly what she meant. After the team clocked out that night, I stayed behind, notebook open, a blank page staring up at me. I had been trying to write the introduction to my cookbook for weeks, but nothing ever felt right. Now, in the silence of my own kitchen, I let the words come. Food has always been my truest language. When words failed, I spoke through flavors. When doors closed, I cooked my way through them. The recipes in this book are more than meals. They're chapters of a life lived in pursuit of authenticity. This is not a story of triumph over adversity. It's a story of choosing truth, again and again, in the face of expectation. I set the pen down. The words sat there, real and quiet and finally enough. Tomorrow would bring another storm. It always did. A supplier who wanted to renegotiate. A publisher who wanted edits. Heather, undoubtedly panicking about seating charts. But tonight, I felt whole. I had built something that could not be taken from me. Not by judgment. Not by rejection. Not even by family. The version of me they thought they knew. The failure, the disappointment, the girl who walked away. She was gone. And in her place stood someone they could no longer ignore. Not because I'd finally won their approval, but because I had stopped needing it. 2 weeks passed like a whirlwind. Spring menu revisions, cookbook layout meetings, a surprise feature request from Forbes about female founders under 35, and early talks about a second location, this time on the West Coast. I moved between it all like someone who'd finally grown into her name. But late at night, when the kitchen was empty and the lights were low, I found myself returning to that dinner. Not the confrontation, though it had been satisfying, but what came after. The morning after the reveal, my mother called, not to apologize, but to ask what my average table turnover time was on a Friday night. It wasn't warmth exactly, but it was curiosity, a sliver of respect. We spoke for 10 minutes. A week later, she called again, just to ask how the cookbook was going. Ethan brought his sons to tour the kitchen. They stood in awe at the prep station while Zoe showed them how to chiffonade basil without cutting your fingers. "This is cooler than Dad's office," the younger one whispered. I grinned. Heather and I had coffee. Twice. She vented about wedding drama. I listened, offered real feedback. No judgment, no competition, just two women, sisters, relearning how to talk. She didn't say thank you for the dinner at Maison, but she did ask if I'd help her plan the rehearsal menu. That was enough. And Bradley? Well, Bradley stayed quiet. A strategic move, probably smart. As for my father, he hadn't said much. But a week after that dinner, I found a package waiting for me at Maison. Inside, an original copy of the French Laundry Cookbook. No note, just a post-it inside the front cover. Even the best know who they are before the world does. RM. It wasn't forgiveness or confession, but it was something, and I had stopped needing it to be more. One night, after everyone had left, I sat alone at my usual table, corner booth, back of the room, where I could see everything, without being seen. The lights were dim, the playlist still looping gently. Jessica had left a fresh pot of chamomile tea on the counter for me before clocking out. A quiet act of care. My phone buzzed. A text from Zoe. "Chef, my mom's coming." "To Saturday's dinner? I've never had her eat something I made. I'm scared. And excited." I smiled. "Good. That means it matters." I texted back. "Make something that tells her who you are." And maybe that's what all of this had been for. Not just the success. Not even the recognition. But the chance to build a life that told the truth of who I was, without apology. The dinner with my family hadn't changed everything. But it had changed enough. They saw me now. Not perfectly. Not entirely. But clearly enough to stop pretending I was someone they could talk over, or talk down to. And more importantly, I had finally stopped needing their permission to take up space. I reached for my notebook and flipped to the cookbook draft. On the blank page, I wrote, "When I was younger, I thought success meant being invited back to the table that once rejected me. Now I understand. Real success is building your own table, in your own kitchen, surrounded by people who don't ask you to shrink." This book is for anyone who's been underestimated, anyone whose dreams were called silly or small, anyone who's ever had to cook their way through the silence of not being seen. You're not alone. The words settled on the page like something earned. Outside, the city kept moving, cars flashing past, couples laughing down sidewalks, kitchens closing, lights flickering off. I took one last sip of tea and let the quiet settle over me. For so long, I thought I was fighting to be accepted. But what I was really doing was becoming someone who no longer needed to be. I had stood in the fire of judgment, walked out, and built something extraordinary, not for applause, but because it was mine. And now, I was ready for what came next. Not to prove anything, not to reclaim anything, just to live, fully, in the life I had created from nothing but grit, garlic, and grace. Have you ever had to choose between meeting expectations and following your own path? Tell me your story in the comments. I'll be reading them all. And if this resonated with you, like the video, subscribe for more. Because the most meaningful success isn't built on validation. It's built on truth. And I've finally found mine. Thank you for being here.